Catherine Matthews had always been the type of person who noticed everything. She noticed when her neighbor Mrs. Henderson forgot to water her roses. She noticed when her coworker Jake started wearing cologne to impress the new girl in accounting. She noticed when her mother rearranged the living room furniture by exactly 3 inches. But, somehow, she almost missed the most important detail of all, that her own body was trying to tell her something was terribly wrong. It started on a Tuesday morning in September. Catherine woke up feeling like she had run a marathon in her sleep. Her arms felt heavy, her legs wobbled slightly as she got out of bed, and there was this strange fog in her mind that made simple thoughts feel like swimming through honey. She stared at herself in the bathroom mirror, studying her reflection with the same careful attention she gave everything else in her life. Her skin looked pale, almost translucent in the morning light. Dark circles shadowed her green eyes, making them appear larger and more fragile than usual. Her auburn hair, normally thick and glossy, seemed to have lost some of its shine overnight. Catherine touched her cheek gently, as if she were looking at a stranger. "Just tired," she whispered to her reflection. "Too much overtime at the marketing firm. Too many late nights planning the wedding." The wedding. Even thinking about it should have filled her with joy, but, lately, Catherine found herself feeling overwhelmed by the simplest decisions. Should they go with cream roses or white? Should the reception be indoors or outdoors? Should they hire a band or stick with a DJ? Questions that once excited her now felt like mountains too tall to climb. Catherine had met William Rodriguez 3 years earlier at a coffee shop downtown. She had been rushing to a client meeting, juggling her laptop bag, portfolio, and a steaming cup of coffee when she collided directly with a tall man carrying an easel and paint supplies. The collision sent both their belongings flying in every direction, and, as they knelt on the sidewalk together gathering scattered business cards and paint tubes, Catherine had looked up into the warmest brown eyes she had ever seen. "I'm so sorry," William had said, his voice carrying a slight accent from his childhood in Mexico. "I wasn't watching where I was going. I was thinking about this painting I'm working on, and, when I get lost in art thoughts, I basically become a walking disaster." Catherine had laughed despite her rush, despite the coffee stain now decorating her white blouse, despite being late for one of the most important meetings of her career. There was something about his smile, something about the way he carefully picked up each of her scattered papers as if they were precious artifacts, something about the genuine concern in his voice that made her forget about everything else. "Don't worry about it," she had replied, watching him gently stack her business proposals in a neat pile. "Honestly, I was probably walking too fast anyway. I always walk too fast when I'm nervous." "Important meeting?" he had asked, handing her the papers with a small, apologetic smile. "Potentially life-changing client presentation," Catherine had admitted. Then, wondered why she was sharing personal information with a complete stranger on a busy sidewalk. Then, "You definitely need to knock them dead," William had said seriously. "Wait here 1 second." He had rushed to a nearby flower vendor, purchased a single yellow daisy, and returned to tuck it behind Catherine's ear with surprising gentleness. "For luck," he had explained simply. "My grandmother always said yellow flowers bring good fortune to important endeavors." Catherine had made it to her meeting 15 minutes late, with a coffee stain on her shirt and a flower in her hair. She had also landed the biggest client of her career that day. When she found William still painting in the park 3 hours later, she had approached him with 2 cups of coffee and the daisy still tucked behind her ear. "Thank you," she had said simply, offering him one of the cups. It worked. That had been the beginning of everything. 3 years of weekend museum visits, late-night conversations about dreams and fears, quiet mornings in William's art studio watching him create beauty from nothing. 3 years of learning that love could be both comfortable and exciting, both peaceful and passionate. 3 years of building a life together that felt like the perfect blend of Catherine's organized practicality and William's creative spontaneity. The proposal had happened 6 months ago in that same park where they had shared their first real conversation. William had set up his easel as if he were just doing another afternoon painting session, but when Catherine arrived with their usual weekend picnic, she found him standing beside a canvas that took her breath away. He had painted their entire love story, the coffee shop collision, their first museum visit, the night they stayed up until dawn talking about everything and nothing, the morning she found him making breakfast in her kitchen wearing her pink apron and singing off-key to the radio. At the bottom of the painting, in William's careful script, were the words, "Catherine, will you let me spend forever adding new scenes to our story?" She had said yes before he even got down on one knee. She had said yes through tears of joy, through laughter, through the overwhelming certainty that this man, this beautiful, gentle, creative soul, was a person. Her forever person. But, now, standing in her bathroom on this Tuesday morning in September, Catherine felt like that joyful, certain woman was slipping away from her. The exhaustion was getting worse instead of better. The strange bruises were multiplying, purple and blue marks appearing on her arms and legs without any memory of bumping into anything. And there was something else, something harder to define but impossible to ignore. She just felt wrong. Like her body was betraying her in ways she couldn't understand. Catherine forced herself to get dressed and go to work, but by lunchtime, she could barely keep her eyes open. Her co-worker Sarah noticed her struggling to stay awake during a client presentation and pulled her aside afterward. "Kath, are you okay? You look really pale, and you seemed kind of out of it in there." "I'm fine," Catherine replied automatically, then paused. "Actually, no. I'm not fine. I think something might be wrong with me." The words hung in the air between them like a confession. Saying it out loud made it real in a way that thinking it privately hadn't. Sarah's face immediately filled with concern. "Wrong how? What's been happening?" Catherine found herself explaining the fatigue, the bruises, the general sense that her body was failing her in mysterious ways. As she spoke, she watched Sarah's expression grow more worried, and she realized that her symptoms sounded much more serious when she listed them all together. "Kath, you need to see a doctor," Sarah said firmly. "Like, today. These symptoms, they could be a lot of things, but you shouldn't ignore them." Catherine wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she was probably just stressed and overworked. But, deep down, she knew Sarah was right. She had been ignoring the signs for weeks now, hoping they would just go away on their own. But they weren't going away. If anything, they were getting worse. That afternoon, Catherine called her family doctor and somehow managed to get an appointment for the next morning. She spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work, but her mind kept wandering to all the possibilities. Maybe she was anemic. Maybe she had mono. Maybe she needed vitamins or better sleep or a vacation. Maybe it was nothing serious at all. When Catherine got home that evening, William was in his studio working on a new painting. She could smell the familiar scent of oil paints and turpentine, could hear him humming softly to himself the way he always did when he was completely absorbed in his work. For a moment, she just stood in the doorway watching him. His dark hair was slightly messy from running his hands through it, a habit he had when he was concentrating. There was a small smudge of blue paint on his jaw, and his hands moved across the canvas with the confident grace of someone who had found his true calling in life. This was her favorite version of William, completely in his element, creating something beautiful, lost in the world of color and form and artistic vision. She loved watching him work, loved seeing the intense focus in his eyes, loved the way his whole body seemed to relax when he was painting. "Hey," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. William turned toward her with a smile that immediately lit up his entire face. "Hey yourself. How was your day? Did the Morrison Project presentation go okay?" Catherine had completely forgotten about the Morrison Project. The fact that something so important to her career had slipped her mind entirely was another red flag she couldn't ignore. "It went fine," she said, moving closer to see his current work. "What are you painting?" William stepped aside to give her a better view. The canvas showed a woman sitting by a window, morning light streaming across her face as she read a book. The woman's hair was auburn, her pose thoughtful and peaceful. "It's you," William said quietly. "From last Sunday morning when you were reading in the kitchen. The light was hitting you just right, and you looked so beautiful and content that I had to try to capture it." Catherine stared at the painting, seeing herself through William's eyes. In his version, she looked serene and lovely, bathed in golden light and surrounded by an aura of quiet happiness. It was nothing like how she felt these days, tired and worried and somehow disconnected from her own life. "William," she said suddenly, the words coming out before she could stop them. "I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow." His brush stopped mid-stroke. "Are you okay? Is something wrong?" Catherine looked at this man who loved her enough to paint her reading a book, who had proposed with a canvas full of their shared memories, who had been nothing but patient and supportive through all her wedding stress and recent moodiness. She realized that she couldn't keep this fear to herself anymore. "I don't know," she admitted. I've been feeling really tired lately, and I have these bruises that I can't explain, and I just feel off. Sarah thinks I should get checked out." William set down his brush immediately and turned to face her fully. His expression was serious but calm, the same way he looked when he was studying a particularly challenging section of a painting. "What kind of tired? What kind of bruises?" Catherine explained everything: the overwhelming fatigue, the mysterious marks on her skin, the brain fog that made simple tasks feel impossible. William listened without interrupting, his artist's eyes carefully studying her face as she spoke. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I'm glad you're seeing a doctor," he said finally. "And I'm going with you." "You don't have to," Catherine began. "Yes, I do," William interrupted gently. "Catherine, we are getting married in 4 months. We are going to promise to be there for each other in sickness and in health. I'd like to start practicing that now, if you don't mind." Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes. She hadn't realized how scared she had been until William offered to share the fear with her. She had been carrying this worry alone for weeks, trying to protect him from her anxiety, trying to handle everything by herself. But the relief of not being alone with it anymore was overwhelming. "What if it's something serious?" she whispered. William took her hands in his, and she noticed that his fingers were still slightly stained with paint. Somehow, that small detail, evidence of his passion, his creativity, his essential William-ness, made her feel more grounded. "Then, we'll deal with it," he said simply. "Together. Whatever it is, whatever happens, we'll face it together." That night, Catherine lay awake thinking about tomorrow's appointment. William slept peacefully beside her, one arm thrown protectively across her waist, and she tried to draw strength from his steady breathing and warm presence. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tomorrow would either confirm her fears or put them to rest. Tomorrow would be the beginning of whatever came next. She had no idea that tomorrow would be the day that divided her life into before and after. Before the diagnosis that would change everything. After the moment when she learned that love could be tested in ways she had never imagined. And that sometimes the greatest challenges brought the greatest gifts. As Catherine finally drifted off to sleep, William's words echoed in her mind. "We'll face it together." She had no idea how prophetic those words would turn out to be, or how much strength she would need to draw from them in the months to come. But, for now, in this moment, with William's arm around her and tomorrow's uncertainty still hours away, those words were enough to let her rest. The waiting room at Dr. Martinez's office was painted in calming shades of blue and green, with soft jazz playing quietly in the background and magazines neatly arranged on small tables. Catherine sat in one of the cushioned chairs, her leg bouncing nervously as she watched other patients come and go. William sat beside her, occasionally reaching over to still her restless movement with a gentle touch. They had been waiting for nearly 45 minutes past Catherine's scheduled appointment time, which only amplified her anxiety. Every time the door to the back offices opened, Catherine's heart rate spiked, expecting to hear her name called. When it finally happened, she almost didn't register the sound. "Catherine Matthews." A nurse in cheerful scrubs smiled at them from the doorway. Catherine stood on slightly unsteady legs, with William rising beside her. The nurse's smile faltered slightly as she noticed Catherine's pale complexion and the way William had to steady her with a supportive hand on her elbow. "Right this way," the nurse said gently, leading them down a hallway lined with examination rooms. The room they entered was small but bright, with morning sunlight streaming through a window that looked out onto a small garden. Catherine settled onto the examination table while William took the single chair beside it. The paper covering crinkled under her as she tried to find a comfortable position. "Dr. Martinez will be with you in just a few minutes," the nurse said, making notes on Catherine's chart. "Can you tell me what's been bringing you in today?" Catherine repeated the list of symptoms she was becoming tired of reciting: the fatigue, the bruises, the general feeling that something was wrong with her body. The nurse nodded and made careful notes, asking follow-up questions about timing and severity. When Dr. Martinez finally entered, Catherine felt a small wave of relief. She had been seeing Dr. Martinez for routine checkups for the past 5 years, and the older woman's calm, thorough approach had always made Catherine feel safe and heard. "Catherine," Dr. Martinez said warmly, washing her hands at the small sink before turning to face them. "And, William, good to see you again. So tell me what's been going on." For the third time that day, Catherine went through her symptoms. But This time, Dr. Martinez asked more detailed questions. How long had the fatigue been building? Were the bruises appearing in any particular pattern? Had Catherine noticed any swollen lymph nodes? Any unexplained weight loss? As the questions continued, Catherine felt a growing sense of unease. These weren't the types of questions she had expected. These sounded like the questions someone would ask when they were looking for something specific. Something serious. The physical examination that followed was thorough and careful. Dr. Martinez checked Catherine's lymph nodes, examined the bruises on her arms and legs, looked at her eyes and throat, felt around her abdomen. Catherine watched the doctor's face throughout the examination, looking for clues about what she might be thinking. "I'm going to order some blood work," Dr. Martinez said finally, settling back in her chair. "There are a few possibilities for what might be causing your symptoms, and the blood tests will help us narrow things down." "What kind of possibilities?" William asked. It was the first time he had spoken during the appointment, and Catherine could hear the careful control in his voice. Dr. Martinez looked between them thoughtfully. "Well, it could be something relatively simple like anemia or a vitamin deficiency. But, given the combination of symptoms, the fatigue, the unexplained bruising, and what I'm seeing in my examination, I want to check for some other possibilities as well." "Such as?" Catherine pressed. "I'd rather wait for the test results before speculating too much," Dr. Martinez replied gently. "But I will say that I want to run a complete blood count, check your platelet levels, and look at a few other markers. We should have the results back by tomorrow afternoon." Catherine felt her stomach drop. If they were getting results back that quickly, it meant the doctor had put a rush on the tests. That didn't happen unless there was serious concern about what they might find. "Is there anything specific I should be watching for in the meantime?" Catherine asked. "Just take care of yourself. Get plenty of rest, stay hydrated, and call me immediately if you develop any fever, severe pain, or if the bruising gets significantly worse," Dr. Martinez instructed. "And, Catherine, try not to worry too much until we know what we are dealing with." The blood draw took only a few minutes, but Catherine felt weak and dizzy afterward in a way that seemed disproportionate to the small amount of blood they had taken. William noticed her swaying and immediately wrapped a steady arm around her waist. As they walked back to William's car, Catherine felt like she was moving through a strange dream. Everything looked the same as it had when they arrived. The same parking lot, the same trees lining the street, the same blue sky overhead. But something fundamental had shifted. An hour ago, she had been a woman with some concerning symptoms. Now she was a woman waiting for test results that might change everything. "How are you feeling?" William asked as they got into the car. "Scared," Catherine admitted. Those weren't the kinds of questions I expected her to ask. William was quiet for a moment, his hands resting on the steering wheel without starting the engine. "You know what my grandmother used to say about fear?" "What?" "She said fear is just excitement without breath. When we're excited about something good, we breathe fast and shallow. When we're afraid of something bad, we hold our breath entirely. But it's the same energy, just moving differently through our bodies." Catherine considered this. "So what am I supposed to do with that wisdom?" "Breathe," William said simply. "Whatever the test results show, we'll handle it. But for right now, we just need to breathe and wait." They spent the rest of that day trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. William attempted to work on his painting while Catherine tried to focus on wedding planning tasks, but both of them were clearly distracted. Catherine found herself staring at the same page of venue options for 20 minutes without reading a single word. William mixed the same shade of blue 3 times, apparently forgetting each time that he had already prepared it. By evening, they had given up any pretense of productivity. They ordered takeout from their favorite Thai restaurant and curled up together on the couch to watch movies, though neither of them paid much attention to what was happening on screen. Catherine kept finding herself studying her arms, counting the small purple bruises that seemed to be multiplying even as she watched. "Stop," William said softly, catching her examining another mark on her wrist. "I can't help it. It's like I'm seeing them for the first time, even though they've been there for weeks." "Looking at them won't change whatever the blood tests are going to show," William pointed out gently. "I know. But I keep thinking that maybe if I look hard enough, I'll understand what's happening to me." William shifted so that he could face her more fully on the couch. "Catherine, Do you remember what you told me when I was having that crisis about whether I was good enough to make a living as an artist? Catherine smiled slightly at the memory. It had been about a year into their relationship, and William had been struggling with doubts about his chosen career path. He had been working part-time at an art supply store while trying to build his painting portfolio, and there had been several weeks when he could barely sell any pieces. The financial stress had combined with creative insecurity to send him into a spiral of self-doubt. I told you that your worth as an artist wasn't determined by whether people bought your paintings in any given month, Catherine recalled. I said that your value as a person wasn't tied to external validation of your talents. Exactly. And you told me that my job was to focus on creating the best work I could, and to trust that the right opportunities would come when they were supposed to. I remember. Well, right now, your job is to focus on taking care of yourself and trusting that we'll handle whatever comes next when it's time to handle it. Your worth as a person isn't determined by whether you're healthy or sick. Your value isn't tied to whatever these test results might say. Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes. But what if I'm really sick, William? What if it's something serious? What if, then, we'll deal with it, William interrupted gently, the same words he had said the night before. Catherine, I need you to hear something, okay? Whatever happens with these tests, whatever diagnosis we might be facing, it doesn't change how I feel about you. It doesn't change the fact that I want to marry you and build a life with you. It doesn't change anything essential about who we are together. But what if I can't be the partner you deserve? What if I'm sick for a long time? Or what if treatments make me different? Or what if... Stop, William said firmly but kindly. You are already exactly the partner I want. Healthy or sick, strong or weak, good days or bad days, you're my person. That's not conditional on anything. Catherine stared at him through her tears, overwhelmed by the fierce certainty in his voice. She had been so afraid that whatever might be wrong with her would somehow damage their relationship, but William was looking at her like she was something precious and irreplaceable. How can you be so sure? She whispered. Because I've been watching you for 3 years, William replied. I've seen how you handle stress, how you treat people when you're tired, how you respond to challenges. I've seen your character, Catherine. I know who you are. And the woman I know is strong enough to handle whatever this is, and generous enough to let me help her handle it. That night, Catherine slept better than she had in weeks. William's words had given her something to hold on to, not false reassurance that everything would be fine, but genuine confidence that whatever came next, they would face it together. The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Catherine was at work, trying to focus on a client presentation, when her phone rang. Dr. Martinez's number appeared on the screen, and Catherine's heart immediately began racing. Catherine, I have your test results, and I'd like you to come in this afternoon to discuss them. Can you be here around 2 o'clock? Is everything okay? Catherine asked, though she already knew from the doctor's tone that it wasn't. I'd prefer to discuss the results in person, Dr. Martinez replied. Can you arrange to have William come with you? Catherine's hands began shaking. Dr. Martinez, please, just tell me something. Is it serious? There was a long pause. Catherine, we'll talk about everything when you come in. But, yes, I think it would be very good for you to have William with you for this conversation. Catherine somehow made it through the next 4 hours, though she couldn't remember a single thing she did at work. William picked her up at 1:30, and they drove to the doctor's office in relative silence. Both of them understood that they were driving toward a conversation that would divide their lives into before and after. Dr. Martinez was waiting for them in her office this time, rather than an examination room. She gestured for them to sit in the 2 chairs across from her desk, and Catherine noticed that there was a box of tissues placed discreetly on the corner of the desk within easy reach. Catherine, Dr. Martinez began gently, your blood work shows some abnormalities that we need to discuss. Your white blood cell count is very low, your platelet count is significantly decreased, and you're quite anemic. When we look at these results together with your symptoms, they point toward a diagnosis of acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. Leukemia. Cancer. She heard William intake sharply beside her, but everything else seemed to fade into a strange, muffled silence. Dr. Martinez continued talking, something about additional tests they would need to run, referrals to oncology specialists, treatment options. But Catherine felt like she was hearing the conversation from underwater. Catherine. Dear. Martinez's voice seemed to come from very far away. Do you have any questions about what I've just told you? Questions. Catherine tried to think of questions, but her mind felt completely blank. How could she have questions about something so enormous and incomprehensible? What happens now? William asked when Catherine remained silent. I've already called Dr. Sarah Chen at the Oncology Center downtown. She's one of the best hematologic oncologists in the state, and she can see Catherine first thing Monday morning. They'll need to do some additional tests to determine the specific subtype of leukemia and stage the disease, but then we'll be able to talk about treatment plans. Treatment plans, Catherine repeated numbly. Catherine, Dr. Martinez said gently, I know this is overwhelming news, but I want you to know that acute lymphoblastic leukemia is highly treatable, especially when caught early. The 5-year survival rate is very good, particularly for someone your age. This is not a death sentence. This is a challenge, but it's one that many people face successfully. Catherine nodded, though she wasn't sure she was really processing what the doctor was saying. Everything felt surreal, like this was happening to someone else and she was just observing from outside her own body. The drive home was mostly silent. William helped Catherine into the apartment and settled her on the couch, then knelt beside her, taking her hands in his paint-stained fingers. Talk to me, he said softly. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that 2 hours ago I was a healthy woman planning a wedding, Catherine whispered. And now I'm a cancer patient. How does that happen so fast? The cancer didn't happen fast, William replied. It's probably been developing for months. What happened fast was finding out about it. Catherine looked at him through eyes that felt hot and dry. Aren't you scared? Terrified, William admitted immediately. I'm terrified of losing you. I'm terrified of watching you be sick. I'm terrified of not knowing how to help you through this. His honesty was somehow more comforting than reassurance would have been. But you're still here. Catherine, where else would I be? This is the in sickness and in health part. We are just getting a head start on our vows. For the first time since Dr. Martinez had said the word leukemia, Catherine felt like she could breathe. William's fear matched her own, but his commitment was absolute. They were terrified together, but they were together. I don't know how to be sick, Catherine said quietly. I don't know how to have cancer. I don't know how to date someone with cancer, William replied. I guess we'll figure it out as we go. Catherine squeezed his hands, focusing on the warmth of his skin, the familiar roughness of his artist's calluses, the steady strength of his grip. Tomorrow they would start learning about treatments and side effects and survival statistics. Tomorrow they would begin the fight of their lives. But today, in this moment, they were still just Catherine and William, still in love, still committed to facing whatever came next together. Should we postpone the wedding? Catherine asked suddenly. William was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to do? I want to marry you, Catherine said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. I want to marry you before I start treatment. I want to marry you while I still look like myself. I want to marry you so that when things get hard, we are legally family. William's eyes filled with tears. Then, that's what we'll do. We'll move the wedding up if we need to. We'll have it in the hospital chapel if we have to. But, Catherine, we are going to get married, and then we are going to beat this thing together. As Catherine fell asleep that night in William's arms, she realized that receiving the worst news of her life had somehow also revealed the best truth she had ever known. She was loved completely, unconditionally, and eternally. Cancer could threaten her body, but it could never touch that love. In fact, as terrifying as the journey ahead looked, she was beginning to suspect that this challenge might make their love stronger than ever before. The oncology center was nothing like Catherine had expected. Instead of the sterile, depressing environment she had imagined, the building was filled with natural light, comfortable seating areas, and walls decorated with colorful artwork. Children's drawings were displayed alongside professional paintings, creating an atmosphere that felt more hopeful than frightening. Dr. Sarah Chen turned out to be a petite woman in her 40s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and an incredibly direct communication style that Catherine found both intimidating and reassuring. She didn't sugarcoat anything, but She also didn't present information in a way that felt overwhelming or hopeless. Your blood work confirms acute lymphoblastic leukemia, Dr. Chen explained, pulling up Catherine's test results on her computer screen. The good news is that we caught it relatively early, and you're young and otherwise healthy. The challenging news is that we need to start treatment immediately. Catherine sat in the chair beside William, holding his hand tightly as Dr. Chen outlined what the next several months would look like. Chemotherapy would begin within the week. The first phase, called induction therapy, would be the most intensive, designed to kill as many cancer cells as possible and get Catherine into remission. This would require hospitalization for several weeks. What about our wedding? Catherine asked. They had already moved the date up by 2 months, but even the new timeline seemed impossible given what Dr. Chen was describing. Dear. Chen paused in her explanation, looking between Catherine and William thoughtfully. When were you planning to get married? 3 weeks from Saturday, William replied. We changed it from January to December when we got the diagnosis. That might actually work, Dr. Chen said slowly. If we start treatment this week, you'll likely feel pretty rough for the first 10 to 14 days. But there's often a window around week 3 where patients start feeling better, before we move into the next phase. It would have to be a small ceremony, and you'd need to be very careful about exposure to germs, but it's possible. Catherine felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. She hadn't realized how important the wedding had become to her until she thought she might have to give it up entirely. The first round of chemotherapy was brutal in ways Catherine hadn't anticipated. The nausea was constant and debilitating, making it impossible to keep food down for days at a time. The fatigue was unlike anything she had ever experienced, not just tiredness, but a bone-deep exhaustion that made lifting her head feel like an enormous effort. Her hair began falling out in clumps after the second week, and she woke up each morning to find strands covering her pillow. But the hardest part wasn't the physical symptoms. It was watching William watch her suffer. She could see the pain in his eyes every time he looked at her, even though he tried to hide it behind encouraging smiles and optimistic conversation. He spent every possible moment at the hospital, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair beside her bed, advocating with nurses when her pain medication wasn't managing her symptoms effectively, and constantly trying to find small ways to make her more comfortable. You don't have to stay here all the time, Catherine told him one evening after a particularly difficult day of treatment. You should go home, work on your paintings, get some real sleep. This is where I want to be, William replied simply, adjusting her blankets for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. William, you look exhausted. When's the last time you showered? Or ate a real meal? He was quiet for a moment, and Catherine could see him considering whether to be honest with her. I can't leave, he admitted finally. I know that doesn't make logical sense, but every time I think about going home, I imagine something happening while I'm gone. What if you need me? What if you wake up scared in the middle of the night? What if you make yourself sick by not taking care of yourself? Catherine interrupted gently. William, I need you to. When Catherine first felt the strange fatigue creeping into her bones, she brushed it off as the stress of wedding planning. When the bruises appeared without explanation, she blamed her clumsiness. When the doctor's face grew pale as he studied her blood work, she knew her world was about to change forever. But what Catherine couldn't have imagined was that this terrifying diagnosis would not destroy her relationship with William. Instead, it would forge a bond stronger than steel, deeper than any ocean, and more enduring than the stars themselves. This is not just a story about illness. This is not just a story about love. This is the extraordinary true account of 2 ordinary people who discovered that when everything else falls away, when fear tries to steal your future, when darkness threatens to swallow hope, love doesn't just survive. It transforms. It becomes something magnificent, something that defies every odd, something that proves the human spirit is capable of miracles. Some love stories begin with a first glance across a crowded room. This one begins with a phone call that changed everything, and ends with a truth so beautiful it will restore your faith in the power of the human heart.